Hey, what's up, guys? I want to do something a little different today. I know normally, of course, I talk about boxing on this channel, but real quick, I just had to talk about some NFL. And you see me rocking my LA Rams cap. I think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year in a couple weeks. But the Washington Commanders announced their new name today. Their new logo, their new team name, with a tweet, right? And you see it right here. The future of Washington football is here. Hashtag take command. And I just found this to be so indicative of the times that we live in. First of all, let me just say, of all the names that they could have chose, you think of Washington, D.C., you think, first of all, it's the capital of the United States, right? It is where our government is located, our federal government. There are so many historical references you could pull from that would be specific to Washington, D.C. and that area. There are historical figures that you could look to, right? There's so many of them. But when I think Commanders, it's so, first of all, it's corny as hell. It's so generic. It's so milquetoast and overly safe and bland. I think of, like, for a comparison, a really dynamic, if a really dynamic name was like a nice flavorful bruschetta, right? You get like this focaccia bread with the tomatoes and a little olive oil and different herbs and spices on there. And you compare that to like a piece of white bread, Wonder Bread, sitting in a windowsill, drying out from the sun. That's what the Commanders is, right? It's like a generic high school football team name, like the Bobcats or the Wildcats or the Cougars. Today the East Side Cougars versus the West Side Cougars. High school football game. Like, that's what I think about. And for those of you who don't have the historical reference here, Washington, D.C. had one of the most storied franchises in NFL history for years, for decades. And their name was I can't say the name here because Google will shut down my channel, because that's how we're living in 2022. But we'll call them the Blank Skins, okay? And for decades, the Washington Blank Skins were one of the most recognizable sports teams in the United States, of all American team sports. And they had some storied history there. They won the Super Bowl, the first NFL team to win a Super Bowl with a black starting quarterback, for instance, right? So some of you wokesters will like that. And they had a lot of great history with the team. But increasingly in recent years, about 1% of the population became triggered by the name and started really, really pushing, the activists on Twitter, pushing to have the franchise change their name. And ultimately, they did the antithesis of taking command. They bent over to the woke mob and changed their name to the Washington Football Team. Now, as bland and generic as that was, at least it worked, because it was a Washington, D.C. team and it was a football team. So that worked, right? It wasn't very good. It wasn't very dynamic or edgy or anything memorable. A lot of people laughed at it, but it worked. And now I think they thought they were being slick because, of course, the Super Bowl is just days away. And they thought, everyone's talking football right now after this great playoffs that we've had the last couple rounds. And so they thought, we're going to get in before the Super Bowl and get the edge and promote our new team name, the Commanders. And I look at this tweet, right? And I look at this poster. I guess this is, I don't know what kind of poster you'd call this, but it's kind of a hype poster or something. And I just look at it. It looks horrible. It looks like a kid in high school did this, who's like taking a Photoshop class or like a web design class. A 15-year-old designed this. Actually, I know a ton of kids in high school that could probably do a lot better than this. But again, I'm looking at this poster here on Twitter. It's so generic. It's so milquetoast. And then the take command hashtag is so ironic and hypocritical, because that is the antithesis of what this franchise did when being confronted by the woke mob for so many years, right? And if you're going to choose a name, choose something indicative of Washington, D.C. that people can picture with the franchise, right? But that's not it. They try to take like the most generic name that they could that wouldn't offend anybody. Here's the thing. The way it's going with the woke mob, and look, I should preface real quick. For those of you who are part of the woke culture, okay, I know that you're probably triggered right now, and you're getting, your butthole is getting a little tighter than normal, because I'm going here and I'm talking about this. But what you have to understand, whether you're the activist woke type or not, whether you're just kind of co-signing it by supporting it, by retweeting or hashtagging or whatever. So you don't have to be the guy throwing a brick through a Starbucks window, okay, in the name of justice, to be guilty here. If you're co-signing that dude and you're co-signing on this, what you have to understand is you are in the minority, the extreme minority. You guys are 10% of the nation. The other 90% of people either tune you out, just pretend you don't exist, because they still are on your side maybe, but they don't agree with the way you go about things, but they don't believe in what you're doing, or they're directly against you, right? 90% of people out there are not parishioners of your church. You guys are parishioners of a certain church. You have a certain secular religion that you believe in, which is cool, man. Do your thing. But you guys got to understand, yes, you dominate the Twitter space. You dominate the axis of media, academia, big tech. But those are bubbles. Outside of those systems, outside of those institutions, there's this thing called the real world. So you feel like you're in the majority because you can beat up on everybody on Twitter and try to cancel people. But outside of that is the real world, where if you try to do that, you get punched in the face and punked. That's why a lot of you hide behind your screen and stay on Twitter, where you can feel like a big tough guy. The problem with you guys, the problem with wokesters, the problem with the woke movement is that you always try to find the next thing. And it's getting whittled down more and more and more. You're having to go to such extremes to find something to cancel and rally against and fight the power against, right? Who's to say that 20, 30 years from now, the term commander isn't deemed offensive? Because when I think of commander, I think of, I'm a former military guy. I think of rank. I think of a person who is in charge, commanding a whole group of people. And if you start looking for dog whistles and hidden meanings, oh boy, you could find some stuff in the word commander. You think, manager, director, supervisor, boss, someone in charge of other human beings, right? Who's to say 20 to 30 years from now that term won't be offensive and they come after the Washington football franchise again and want them to change the name commander to everybody's equal, the Washington equals? Like, that could happen. And that's the thing with wokeism. It is a cancer. And for that cancer to stay alive, for that parasite to stay alive, they have to find a new host. They have to find something to attach itself to eat away at and try to cancel. And that's one thing about wokeism, which I think the commanders one day will be deemed offensive by a group of people. It will happen because already we can't use certain words. I think the NBA banned the word owner. You couldn't use the word owner of a franchise. I think now they're called director or something like that. I can't even remember the exact word. But commander, I'm telling you, they're going to come after you for this. But the thing that drives me nuts about wokeism the most is it strips away individuality, edginess, risk-taking, things that are entertaining to an audience, right? And you get to this place where everything's the same. Everything is overly safe, very bland, very generic, because nobody wants to take a chance. And if you look at a lot of the programming out right now, the commercials, the TV shows, the films, even the music and stuff, it's overly, I'm talking pop music, it's overly safe, it's overly generic. And we're going to get to a place where, who's to say 30 years from now, the NFL isn't just 30 some odd teams named the whatever city football team. Meaning you have a game between the Detroit football team and the Atlanta football team, followed by a game between the New York football team versus the New York football team, because New York has 2 teams, so does LA, right? So you could have a game where it would be the LA football team versus the other LA football team. We could get to that place if we keep going here. Because if you constantly have to find something, if you constantly have to find hidden meanings in things and dog whistles and all this stuff that the other 90% of people don't see, right? Because most people, we take each other at our word. But if you're one of those people that wakes up in the morning determined to find something to be angry about, you'll find something. I could post a picture of a puppy right here and you'll find something to break down and somehow relate it to whatever thing triggers you. And that's where wokeism takes us. And we're going to wind up in a place where there's no entertainment value in our sports. There's no entertainment value in our entertainment, period. And we're going to wind up with a bunch of names and logos like this. What the hell is this? The Commanders? Honestly, it kind of sounds like a really cheesy, like one-hit wonder band from the 80s or something. I think of Casey Kasem's Top 40 Countdown or whatever it was, and I think of like a hair band that had one hit song and they were named the Commanders. I mean, that's what this sounds like. Anyway, I just had to get this off my chest. I thought it was hilarious. It's nothing that I'm like losing sleep over. I'm not going to think about this 5 minutes from now, but I saw that tweet today and I laughed my ass off because it was so corny and so bad. And I'm like, this is where we're headed as a society. It's crazy. We got to stop this stuff, guys. We got to start living again. And living means taking chances. Life equals risk. When you walk outside your house or apartment or wherever you live, your dorm, there's risk out there. That's called being alive. That's being a human.